This is Shishkin, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Today's guest speaks 4 languages. He was in Forbes 30 Under 30. He's a serial entrepreneur and CEO of Informed, a news concierge service to beat misinformation overload in the traditional media. Please welcome Shishkin to the program. How are you doing, Kira?
Hey, Matt, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for welcoming me on the show.
I'm honored to have you. You have a very cool story. I'm jealous of anyone that can speak more than one language. So before we get into your story, what are the languages you speak?
It really kind of maps to my life journey. I was born and raised in Ukraine, and so that's where I picked up Ukrainian. I was born to Russian parents who were transitioning from a Russian to Ukrainian identity, and that's how I learned Russian. And then I moved to Israel and spent almost a decade there. That's where I learned Hebrew. And somewhere along the way, I picked up a little bit of English.
Well, that little bit of English is better than mine, and I'm a native Californian, so my hat's off to you. So, yeah, what was the first kind of memory you have growing up? What place was that?
Gosh, well, it was the capital of Ukraine. It was Kiev, and I was born and raised there to the sort of like transitioning family from a Soviet time. My father was a first generation Ukrainian coming from the Soviet Union. My mother was a second generation. Her parents came from Moscow into Ukraine. And it was, I think that's an early memory, kind of seeing that world, living in a very big city in the context of Eastern Europe, which is also very different from, a big city like in the United States or elsewhere.
Right. And what prompted the move?
From where we're from Israel for me?
Yeah.
Wow. It's a whole, a packed story, but it's a bit of a tragedy. Me, my mother, my sister, which is kind of like my nuclear family unit, we actually got into a tragic car accident that really changed the course of our lives, initially for a lot worse, but ultimately for a lot better. And we moved to Israel for healthcare. I was really young. I had a lot of, quite a reset in my life. It was a real reset moment. And so yeah, that prompted the move. So it wasn't actually out of desire, it was sort of out of need. But spending almost a decade in Israel has made me really realize how lucky I was to wind up there for a moment.
Well, from tragedy, you made opportunity. That's pretty incredible. What was your first job, Kira?
Yeah, when I came out of university, I went into investment banking. That's a phenomenal career for someone who doesn't know what they want to do. And I don't come away from that industry with like rancor or some sort of they hurt me. A lot of people do, and it's a shame. But for me personally, I've grown a lot through it. And I've had a chance to work in multiple banks, and it's really a very fast exposure to so many other industries and so much of like professional life very quickly. So if you don't know what you want to do, you can't go wrong with taking a high pressure role like that.
Oh, I remember, gosh, this was in the early 2000s. I did some investment banking interviews, and back then they were notorious for like the brain teasers, like how many bottle caps are in New York City, and they just kind of want to watch you squirm. I don't know if they still do brain teasers, but what was the interview process like for you, Kira?
Oh yeah, way back it was similar because I think I think we call them almost like case studies, right? When they're trying to see how you think. I think what they're really evaluating for, that's what I would evaluate for if I was to hire right now, is the clarity of thought and the ability to communicate the clarity of thought. Counting the trash cans in Los Angeles or bottle caps in a mall, it's all about the same thing. Is how do you go from an ambiguous problem into a framework to tackle it, right? And your ability to communicate that clarity is really going to be not a bad indicator for the ability to deal with the ambiguity of the work.
Yeah, it's not just to watch people squirm. That's what I thought. It was just to see if I'd sweat, but it is to kind of better understand how people work. And now that you've kind of been on the other side where you've started your own things, what questions would you want people to answer, or how would you coach people who are going to go through the job interview process?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't shy away from the classic, show me how you think for an ambiguous problem. I think counting the trash cans in New York is not a bad way to hear how someone thinks. I always ask, what is your superpower? Like, I just ask that directly. First of all, if they don't know that, that to me, like, I don't want to be the employer that like they find out through. Like, I'd rather like, get someone who already is a bit more confident in their ability, which doesn't mean they have to be young or old, experienced or not, but you can be a pretty young person and have gone through some reflection, have gone through some soul searching to figure out, okay, what am I actually really good at? Having that awareness to me is a really strong signal. And aside from that, I'm also very interested in strength of communication skills, right? It doesn't matter who you are. If you're not a good communicator, that's all going to be sort of, mute. And so to me, that's really important.
I'm glad you said that, because when it comes to analyzing numbers or finding facts, like I could probably go on ChatGPT and find with pretty good accuracy how many bottle caps there are in New York. But if I can't communicate that, it's fairly worthless. So when it comes to communication skills, what do you look for, and what do you think is missing in a lot of us?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like empathetic communication when it's not just about like being nice and saying the right words. Like it's all about like not being an asshole. But it's also
Mhm.
about like the empathetic communication of like anticipating what the other person is worried about, what they're thinking about, and trying to preempt that, right? So, for example, like we've never met before, right? And for example, I hire you for a contract, right? Maybe you're gonna do some sort of analysis for me. You as a person I'm gonna hire, you should know that hey, we've only spoken a few times. I might have anxiety around investing money in you, and now I need to be brought along for the journey. And so for you as a good communicator, you would say, hey, I want to like upfront loop you into the bit of the process so you feel comfortable at ease, and then I'm gonna go run off and do my thing. But first, like I want to give you some visibility. I want to lead you into it. I want to maybe ask you questions if you're someone who likes to stay involved, right? Being empathetic and being sensitive to the other person's kind of needs and context at the time and communicating proactively around that. And so it's not just about the word choice. It's not just about being nice, although it's all about those things too and tone, but it's about sort of being anticipatory of the other.
I like it. So being empathetic and anticipatory are superpowers. So those are ones I want to hone over time, Kira.
We
We'll
might,
get it.
we might just hire you, Matt.
I,
Keep.
I I'm always looking for a job. You never know. So I want to get into your current situation, but you mentioned that you had a pretty favorable view of investment banking, and a lot of young people don't, especially those who maybe don't make a career of it. What are some deals, or what aspects of the industry were you a part of?
Oh gosh, I've had a chance to work at a healthcare specialty bank called PTIG. That one was it was awesome to see a middle market bank kind of in its full fruition, growing, scaling. That really got me exposed to healthcare and a pretty large, bio. And then I really found my passion more on the technology side, primarily in software. And so it's been really exciting to, being able to support and work side by side, almost like a therapist at some, right? You play all those hats as a therapist, as a doctor, someone who's writing for a prescription, someone who's also, taking lead from, the client. There's so many hats you get to wear. And I think the highlight where I really enjoyed was I was working for Growth Point Technology Partners, which is really a specialist in late stage software M&A. So before the company matures into like a large, very established player, but they're very late in their venture, right? So maybe they're Series D, maybe they're later. And at this point, they're kind of considering either growth equity, right? Further investments, which would also be able to help underwrite, or a sale that is pretty early sale in the context of like a company's timeline. And so there we just got a really amazing opportunity to work so closely with the founding team, right? Before it becomes a management team and also a founding team, work closely with founders and do it in a space where there's still a lot of agility, there's still a lot of pivoting, there's still like this venture mindset, there's still this venture climate, but you're already at the M&A stage. And so that was pretty exciting. Working across ranges of tech, from compliance tech to fintech to education tech, that got me really hooked on technology.
Yeah, tech is a big umbrella, but you didn't stay there. What motivated you to do something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got this opportunity. I was almost like headhunted into it, but I couldn't say no. It was a business school connection from Booth that just invited me to come in and do something different in a place that had a lot more resource. And generally, I would say no to an opportunity like that because it was very corporate, in many ways conglomerate. It was a public company. It was into it, right? But the opportunity and the role that they've had was so dynamic and agile and had so much sort of ability to do a lot with it It was entrepreneurial in many ways. And so I didn't hesitate for too long. And so I joined that team and we've had a chance to do some really amazing stuff. I think the highlight of that was definitely in a very small team. I think we're 5 people. We incubated a company from zero, like from no idea to full on person team with the distribution of the conglomerate, distribution of Intuit, right? We've allocated $30 million for it. And now it's a nine-figure marketplace business for Intuit. And so that process itself was thrilling. And you don't get opportunities like that very often, especially in an environment and a context like a large tech company. So that was really special. I felt very lucky to have had that opportunity.
That's impressive. And I guess, what did you learn the most? Like, what was your big takeaway from your time at Intuit?
Oh gosh. Well, giants move slow, and that's okay, right? Because there's a huge amount of resource that they're moving around as they are tilting their huge bodies. But if you're able to kind of harness that in the right ways, the thing I learned most from Intuit is that it doesn't matter what scale you're at, whether you're in the earliest stages of a bootstrap venture or you're in a large, 100 million users, a conglomerate that's been around for 40 years. The obsession with the customer's problem and the focus on the customer is the barrier to entry. You cannot skip that. You don't get a waiver later on the scale. That is just the currency of building it and sustaining a business, like building a durable business. And that's something that really rubbed off on me and I took to my ventures after.
So focus on the customers. That's good advice, people.
Yeah.
So talk to us about Informed, because news is such a kind of a polarizing, strange, it's a legacy industry, but it's in need of disruption. So what's the story there?
You couldn't have said it better. It's a legacy industry. It's been around forever, but it's in desperate need of disruption because most people stop reading the news. And if you look at most of our friends, right, most of the people we know, they don't read news anymore. And if they do, they likely read news from social media, right? Or from like their own favorite publication that's already telling them what they want to think.
Yeah. It's we go to news sources that affirm our biases. That's my point of view.
Exactly, and that's really unfortunate because, right, what happens is you either don't read news at all, so you're sort of self-disenfranchised. You don't really have an opinion. You haven't done the reading before showing up to class, right, in the class of life analogy.
Yeah.
But then if you do read the news, currently today in the United States, you're reading news that mislead you. Whether they're misleading you one way or another doesn't matter. That's your choice. But they do mislead you. And there isn't really this, power of facts type of resource that just seeks to inform you and step back without catering to your echo chamber, without trying to trigger an emotional response in you, right? And without overwhelming you with solicitations, clickbait, sensationalism, bias, right? We don't really have solutions like that. And it's messed up because we have solutions for so many other things, and yet we still don't have this information infrastructure. And so we set out with informed.now, my current venture, we set out to build this kind of information integrity, information infrastructure for the everyday American. And we've had a lot of success already, and it's exciting to be on this journey that feels so purposeful and timely, and just really, waking up excited every day.
I'm happy to hear that and also I love how it's presented. It's very simple. You said there's the absence of clickbait is sort of the new feature that I think is fantastic. But what you said is super compelling, but it also is not necessarily why someone would change jobs. Like what motivated you to be like, all right, I not only see this problem, I want to like make it my livelihood. What's the story there?
Gosh, I think it's a convergence of these two threads of my life. One is very personal and one is very public oriented in many ways, right? From the personal side, ever since sort of my young upbringing with, a fair amount of trauma with that car accident that I mentioned, I've experienced a disability for like a pretty substantial part of my life, definitely of my youth. And that disability, it was a package of things, but one of them that was really very consequential for me is I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't pay attention. And I felt like I couldn't remember things. I couldn't learn. I felt very much like set back in my ability to use my brain. And if I had to simplify it into like what that was, is I wasn't able to wield my attention. And since that, and a few years after, as I've kind of miraculously somewhat recovered from that experience and built back better, over that experience, I've gotten this obsession with this idea that like, hey, your superpower is unlocked. Whatever your superpower is, whoever you are as a human, it is unlocked through your ability to wield your attention. And if you cannot concentrate, if your attention is not your own, then you are sort of muted, right? You live your life on mute. And it's unfortunate. I want to be able to help people safeguard their attention where it matters so they can focus it where it matters most to them. And so that's part of the mission and the spirit behind informed.now is to safeguard your attention, at least in the space of consuming news media. Now, why news media? That's the second thread, which is I've seen Ukraine, I've seen Israel, right? And those continue to be some of the loudest conflicts of
I was like the loudest conflicts, at least in America, but
right. And globally too, they are really right. They're really consequential, and they are really global conflicts that are just being fought regionally. And I can go into what that means, but seeing that's where I grew up. I grew up in war. I grew up in conflict of information warfare as well. And so I've seen the stakes of how important it is to be able to make up your own mind, to be able to have independent thinking. It's enabled by your media instead of that is thwarted and sort of capsuled by the legacy media that beat, right? And so coming to the United States, I've kind of seen that happen again. We right now are in the middle of a cultural civil war here in this country, and we don't know it because we're living through it. But our children are going to read this in the books, right? In the textbooks on history. Just seeing the stakes coming from where I came from, I'm like, hey, we need to do something about this right now. We should have been doing something about this before 2016. Now it's been 10 years of, a truthless world. And I feel there's an urgency to do something about it. And so these two forces kind of converge to create the animating force behind informed.now.
Wow. So there's a lot of important things you said there, but one I want to drill down on is just the kind of understanding bias, especially when it comes to news. If you look at, I remember during the pandemic, certain news organizations largely were funded by pharmaceutical companies. So inevitably, there's going to be differences in what they report or don't report and what they call misinformation or disinformation. But pretty much anything with humans is going to have bias. And even if there's AI, it's still going to be programmed by humans. Like, what can be done to sort of either provide transparency to the bias, eliminate it? Like, what improvements are available?
Totally. I think I don't agree that anything with humans has bias. I think anything with humans with intention to have bias will have bias. But if your intention is to remove it, to neutralize, to objectify news, that is totally possible. And it's possible by removing the intention that seems to be put there by every outlet in the world to try to convince you of how to feel, try to tell you that you should be angry or that you should be fearful, right? These are emotions that sell. They've sold news for the whole, history of the industry. But it doesn't have to be this way. Just because it has been this way this whole time doesn't mean it has to be this way forever. We're here to a new news reading habit that is intentionally boring. Our news are intentionally boring. When you read them, they don't provoke a response. This is not creative writing, right? If you're a creative writer, don't go into journalism. Please don't do it. Save us all the stress, right? This is not a writing craft, not to us. It's a research craft. It should be dry. It should be very pure. It should just tell you what's going on and leave it at that. Most of when Americans talk about news, when they say, hey, have you seen the news? They're not talking about news. They're talking about news commentary. Because news commentary is what's so abundant in this country. News itself, like what happened, where, when, what's the immediate context, is non-existent. It's inaccessible to the everyday American. And that's what we are bringing. The power of the news wire. What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Who was involved? What's the context that you need to know to comprehend? We are not going to tell you what to think. That's up to you. That's your responsibility. We're going to encourage independent thinking. We're going to empower you to make up your own mind. And when you have that intention, it's actually not so hard to have neutral news because you aren't saying more than the essentials. And you're specifically neutralizing the language, the tone, the word choice to make sure that the facts that you're bringing are just the facts. There is no color. There's none of that.
When you talk about neutralizing the language, I guess what are examples that come to mind of bias words? Because I think sometimes people don't think certain words are biased, but depending on who's viewing them, can you share any thoughts on that?
This is my favorite example. Congress claws back funding for the bill, right? It's like, why did you have to say that, right? And it's a very common headline, right? Like Congress or some sort of Senate function, some sort of a legislative function, they claw back funding for the bill. It's like, no one is clawing back anything, right? That is such a unnecessarily colorful language that is clearly creating images in your mind, that is clearly agitating you to feel anger, to feel fear, to feel a response. And that's just a very surface level example. If you look at the front page of any news site, literally any news site, print or digital, it's filled with headlines that provoke fear, that provoke anger, and that provoke outrage. And it's not even clickbait anymore, it's outrage bait. And it's unfortunate because it's not just the headlines, it's all over the article too, right? You click into it, get clickbaited into it. But then as you read through it, gosh, it's so sensationalized. And it isn't just an accident. It isn't just an intention. It is a structural sensationalism. The industry runs on it and everyone gets paid through it. And so it's almost like the legacy players cannot structurally get themselves out of the shadow of sensationalism, because that's how the whole industry works. And it doesn't have to be this way. It just doesn't.
Thank goodness. And it's tough to ask someone from the corporate press to change. It's not going to happen from within. Historically, press outlets have been advertiser funded. What's different? What do you want to see? How is Informed able to stay afloat?
Absolutely. Advertisers are sort of the main, I don't want to call it the main enemy, but I want to say that they're the main person to blame, right? They're the main person to blame that we don't have news anymore, that we only have noise. That's news-related noise, right? I think it's not just them. It doesn't stop there. It's also sponsors, right? It's a type of advertiser, maybe it's a different breed of an advertiser, but if you sponsor a publication, right, if you are a pharma company, for example, it doesn't advertise necessarily, but you own or have a huge, shareholdership or some sort of ownership of a media company, some sort of stake, you are going to have influence. You mentioned that over the pandemic just now. You're going to have influence that isn't right. It isn't right to have that influence. And so that's another influence. I think a third and important one is investors, right? If there's an investor breathing down your neck and saying, hey, we need you to raise prices, we need you to profit, we need you to do more, that's going to lead you to make decisions that are aligned to that, right? They're beholden to that shareholder interest. And lastly, I would say is a bit more indirectly, but the tech platforms, right? If you are a media company and you're a serious media company, you can't not be on all the social media platforms. You have to be on LinkedIn. You're going to have to be on Twitter. You're going to have to be on, everything under the sun. And when you play in those environments and you're serious about showing up there, you're going to play by the rules. You're going to play by the rules of the algorithm. You're going to play by the rules of that platform. And so you're now inadvertently also beholden to those tech platform interests that only exacerbate structural sensationalism, only exacerbate the clickbait and the emotional triggering. And now you're amplifying all these bad things about the industry, times 1,000 through social media and on these platforms. And so it's not just advertisers, but it's this whole multipolarity of, shareholder interest that the corporation is beholden to, no matter how you spin it. There is no company that's major and large right now that people know about that is not beholden to these forces. The only way out is, perhaps it's a little bit not of a smart business idea. You can only accept revenue from the person that you serve. As soon as you start accepting revenue from someone else, you're going to start serving them. And the news industry no longer serves the reader, it serves the advertiser or any of those other parties I mentioned. We are bringing it back to serving the reader alone. We refuse advertiser revenue. You don't think we get it every day? Someone's like, hey, can I advertise this? No, we don't accept this. Only the reader can guide us because we're building for the reader, and that's what we need. We don't need another company that does news. We need another company that does news with actually putting the reader first.
Well, I love that. I saw a quote a while back. I think it was in reference to Facebook, but it applies to much of social media. It says, if you're getting something for free, you're the product. And it's only gotten creepier because you realize how algorithmified your news feed is. And then the amount of information these big companies can find out about you is super creepy. So I'm really heartened that you're doing this, but it's a disruption. It's a big change. You're turning the industry upside down, so to speak. When you go out to investors or when you go out to stakeholders, what's some of the common pushback you get?
Yeah. I mean, we intentionally do not have investors. We've done funded companies before, and this company just didn't need that. So it is very intentionally bootstrapped, and we don't see that changing anytime soon because we are also profitable. And so at this point, we've kind of passed the threshold of needing to beg someone else for their money. It's possible, I don't want to close the door in case there's a strategic value to that, but it wouldn't be purely financial. In our case, we're not really beholden to any other interests rather than their users and sort of like our own to have this impact scale. What's really interesting, and it kind of goes back to my earlier response to your earlier question, but we do get pushback from people, and it's hilarious to me, like who kind of can see it all, and to the rest of our users who are already in an installed base, and they already know, like, hey, this is actually the best thing to have happened to like mindful media and news mindfulness. But people get like, oh my God, I'm scared to give you a phone number. I'm scared to give you my phone number because I'm not used to this format. You're going to text me? Oh, I'm scared of that. When in reality, the way we're designed is the most privacy preserving format imaginable because we cannot track open rates. We don't even do that. That's like basics. That is just basics, right? We cannot track your cookies. We don't track your browsing history, right? We don't know where you're clicking, what you're buying. We don't know anything about you. In fact, a lot of our users are anonymous. That's possible on our platform. You don't have to tell us your real name if you don't want to. We don't care. We're not here to harvest your data. In fact, we collect zero data about you, right? And so to us, we've built something that is so like new era of absolute privacy, okay? And anonymity, not even just privacy. But people are like, oh my God, I'm scared to give you my phone number. When they're going to go onto a website, next click over, and they're going to get harvested like a garden. I don't know.
It's springtime. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
for sure.
6,000 cookies, tracking, browsing history, all kinds of information, like scroll time, scroll speed, like the amount of information they're going to, just pawn off on the next website is crazy to compare. But that's comfortable because that's what we're used to. And
right.
Difference.
We're used to kind of opening the kimono, and now we're nervous about giving a phone number. It's pretty funny. Yeah. I've heard of, obviously there's Google, which you can customize to get a different news feed, and there's a organization or service called Ground News where you pay a fee and it's still from news sources, and then they kind of rate biases. I guess, how is Informed similar or different to Ground or some other competitor?
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that. I think the Ground News is super important player and force in the industry of what we would call news digest. And I would say we aren't really news, we're in the news digest kind of sub-branch of the news umbrella. And it's important because there are a lot of news junkies who are really interested in the analysis of like, hey, like where, who is underreporting, who's overreporting, left or right based on a certain issue, which is essentially what Ground News does. We are sort of the opposite of Ground News. And why is that? It's because they provide you more. We provide you less. Purpose, right? Ground News is a great solution for someone who is a news junkie, right? Who loves reading the news, who wants to read a little bit more. They want to read the left side. They want to read the right side. They are interested in the range of like what people are saying, right? And there's definitely a market for this, and people category for this who want to read more news, who want to read double, if not triple. We cater to the person who wants to read 0x the news, right? And if we're saying, if you're going to spend 1 minute a day getting informed, this is what's going to make it. This is what you need to know. And it's already coming to you without any blue or red color. It's not all biased. You don't have
It's
to
not.
read double or triple the news. You need to read like 0.1x of the news. And that's a very different use case, and it targets a very different person, right? Ground truth is for the news junkie. We are for the person who doesn't like news, is frustrated with news, but wants to stay informed.
I love that they're frustrated with the news, and like, who isn't? And you
Right.
want to stay informed. So I guess
We have a bigger market.
this might sound like I'm being sarcastic, but I mean it sincerely. Is there a struggle for customers to figure out what to do with the added time? Because if you're used to spending 90 minutes, several hours reading news, and you can get it in a few seconds, what happens then?
It's terrible. It's terrible, Matt. You have no idea. Customers, text us all the time saying, "Hey, this is messed up. I'm lost now." I used to spend 3 hours reading news. I used to read, the left side, and I used to read the right side. Then I used to watch TV. Then I walk into a bar and I would look at TV and I'd be confused because I didn't hear this and it's being dramatized. And I don't know what to do with that time anymore, Matt. What should we do? We're very sorry. We're very sorry for the newfound time. I apologize. And we recommend you spend it on your hobbies, on your, work accomplishment, work achievement, and just like your family, perhaps. But we're sorry for robbing you of news. It's we're gonna have a funeral for the legacy news industry next week, and we'll all honor the old ways of wasting your time.
Kira, I would love to be a pallbearer for the legacy media's funeral. That might be next to the birth of my kids and getting married, the proudest achievement of my life. That's I mean, yeah, it's like read a book, go for a walk, listen to music, and everyone says I wish there were more hours in the day. Well, the rate of spinning of the Earth is probably not going to change, but you're actually giving people more hours in the day. So thank you for that.
Thank you for acknowledging, sharing this in the first place. I mean, it's a mix, right? It's a balance. Because on one hand, you don't want to live in isolation of reality. And when people do that, it's more dangerous than they realize. It's not just that you don't know what's going on. You become vulnerable to hearing things from other people, right? You go to a bar, you go with your friends, you get secondhand, which is always third hand. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Right? I can't believe it. You're susceptible to propaganda. You're susceptible not just to like the gossip and the rumors, you're susceptible to being misled through the things that you do get exposed to. And that's really problematic. And you don't realize it because when you stop reading news and you start kind of isolating yourself from the information ecosystem, you kind of lose the critical thinking layer of like the first thing you see, you are going to be more sensitive to it inevitably. That's just human. And we're giving you a way to, have that, to have sort of a plug that what's going on so that you show up to work, you show up to a dinner, you show up to your family and you aren't bothered. You aren't swayed by what people are talking about because you know what's going on, right? But you didn't spend any time. You spent a minute a day. We guarantee you it's a minute a day. If it's more, then you have reading comprehension issues. It's a 100-word text. You should not spend more than a minute on it. And so it's like you can have both. You can have your time back, your peace of mind back, and you can have the dignity of being informed, the power of fact.
I love you have the dignity of being informed, and you're not going to be as brainwashed as the rest of us. So that's another win. I'm curious, Kira, what have you done professionally that you're most proud of?
Gosh, I hate me taking the big risk here because it was a fourth venture, but it felt different in so many ways. It's the first consumer venture in this way. Like, it's not a business. It's very much like person to person. It's a different animal, and bootstrapping it intentionally from the beginning. There was no hesitation that this is the right decision for this venture. And so this has been a big risk, and I'm proud of taking that risk and to, get the traction and the level of notoriety that we've, gained since. And it means a lot. I think I'm also really proud of the help that I've been able to give other people throughout my career. This is an invisible part of my career. I don't blog about it, write about it, I don't tell people about it as much, but I am proud and honored and privileged to be trusted with a portfolio of companies as an advisor, like as a friend. And also, I don't charge for these things. I'm not someone who pay to talk to me. I help a lot of my friends build companies, and that means so much to me to be let in and be allowed to help. A great mission, a great impact for a great person. To me, that's a huge point of pride, and something that I don't think I'll ever stop doing.
You're a good friend. I can tell that. What are you most optimistic about?
Oh my God, I'm optimistic about everything. I think everything. I really think we are like in a little storm right now, and I'm really excited for the sun to come out. I think we're in a cultural civil war. I think we are socially like very divided, extremely. I think we're politically disenfranchised, like wildly so. Self-disenfranchised and also literally like mutually disenfranchised. And I'm not like things are weird. Like we're in this weird transition period. But I actually think like it doesn't get me down at all. Like I think we are just transforming. And I think we are not at the beginning of it. I think we're like actually like quite in the middle, maybe even the later stages. I think things are getting clearer, better. I think all these like cultural, social, political, just zeitgeist struggles are very formative for the new generation of builders and creators and like dreamers. And I can already feel those currents kind of taking place. Like I can sense a new generation of leadership sort of coming from a younger generation, and I'm really excited for it. I think we are just experiencing rain right now, and we know what happens after rain. Actually, I don't know if it's guaranteed, but usually after rain, there's some good weather and maybe a rainbow. And I don't know. I'm tuned to this analogy, but I'm really looking forward to sort of how we are building character as a generation, or not even a generation, but like as a snapshot of all generations that are alive right now. Like I'm really excited for things that are unfolding. I'm excited also separately, apart from the zeitgeist issue. I'm really stoked, I would say, for mass AI adoption, like people maturing in their adoption of AI in a way that it's no longer hype, is sort of a lot more grounded and actually incorporating into everything to help us to bring this tool with its full power, beyond the hype. I'm really excited for that. I think we're in the early innings of that, and to be living in a world that is enabling and adopting that technology is absolutely exciting. It's phenomenal. I don't know. There's some optimism there.
I'm stoked to have you on. This has been a lot of fun. For people out there tuning in, where can they learn more about Informed? Where can we send these curious folks?
Absolutely. I mean, if there are medium mindfulness or medium mindful people among us, let's please send them over to our website. Our brand name, like a company name, which is informed.now, is also our website. We have like a cool extension with informed.now, and you go there, you can learn so much more about what we're doing. Kind of our mission, why we're doing it, and also join us, the ranks of news minimalists, news mindfulness folks, and people who both want their attention and to be informed at the same time. We empower that, and we're lucky to have folks who share that passion, who share that mission.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Kira, Shishkin, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Matt. This has been delightful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.